For longtime viewers of this channel, you probably know that I really love the Resident Evil series. For new viewers of this channel, well, I really love the Resident Evil series. I was first exposed to Resident Evil 2, and absolutely loved the campiness, the gore, and just the overall gameplay of the game. Fast forward to present day, I found this game, Nightmare of Decay, on Steam, and reviews had stated that it felt like a first-person, old-school survival horror-style game. Sign me the hell up. You don't get any sort of video intro when you start the game. Just a simple menu with music that immediately reminded me of Silent Hill games. Already loving it. Start a new game and you're given a small intro with some oddly voiced characters that honestly sounded a bit unsettling. It's of a news report of some missing people that complain about headaches and hallucinations before disappearing. You remark that you've had some headaches yourself, grab some food, and holy crap, it's starting already. You go to bed, then wake up somewhere where you don't know where you are. You meet up with a talking black cat that tells you that you are in a nightmare world and no one has ever survived it. Go down the stairs, pick up a knife, and run into a scene that seems plagiarized from the very first Resident Evil game. No complaints here though, because the game truly feels like an homage to those early games. And that's what Nightmare of Decay is, a love letter to the PS1 era survival horror games. The game takes place primarily in a large mansion, with a few other surrounding areas allowed to be accessed. You'll find a few weapons that will enable you to defend yourself against zombies, cultists, and other monstrosities that live here. And since everything happens in the first-person view, aiming and moving is much easier to do than it was in those games, since you don't have to worry about tank controls. That knife that you find in the start of the game isn't the only tool you'll use, but it will be helpful to minimize the amount of ammo that you fire off, because as you'd expect, it's limited. You'll be able to take down zombies with the knife if you're careful, but upon reaching bosses, cultists, dogs, and other creatures, you may want to utilize your firearms. In order to create recoil, your guns start off with a wide crosshair, and will shrink down to make your shots more accurate if you stop moving. And yes, as you'd expect, headshots are your friends. There's really not much else to say about the combat. It's fairly straightforward. Point the crosshair to what you want to stab and or shoot, and click to stab and or shoot. Of course, taking out zombies isn't the only thing that you're going to be doing. There's plenty of easy puzzles that you can run into, such as mixing acid to remove a fleshy growth, or finding silver plates to build a bridge to the next area. The mansion isn't terribly large, so you won't be scratching your head to figure out where you need to go. And even if you do get a bit confused, there's an easy to use map that will help you out. One thing that you do need to be careful of when exploring your surroundings is your stamina gauge. It works a bit differently than something you might be used to. When you are in a room with no threats, you can run as much as you want. However, if there is an enemy present in the room that you're currently occupying, you will have a standard stamina gauge. It's a pretty nifty idea and one I kinda like, since it lets you move quickly if you want when there's nothing around that could impede your progress. And it's good that this is here because your normal movement is painfully slow. But the thing is, you should expect it in a game like this. If you can move lightning fast, this wouldn't be a horror game, it would be an action game. And that's not what Nightmare of Decay was shooting for. One thing that could be considered as an annoyance in the old Resident Evil games is the inventory systems. You could only carry a limited amount of items, typically 6 or 8, and had to utilize magical item boxes that somehow transported any loot that you dropped into it to any other item box. Not sure how this worked, but hey, video games. In Nightmare of Decay, this isn't a problem. You can carry as much crap as you want. Although I wouldn't have minded having an item box for old time's sake, I'm definitely not complaining that it's not here. One gripe that I do have, although it's kind of minor, is with the difficulty. For the most part, it's not unbalanced at all. You are given enough ammo to fight if you want, the knife is actually useful, and you can easily run around the shambling terrors if you want to. However, when you do run up against cultists, things get a bit frustrating. See, they have guns, and they're somewhat accurate with them. If you don't have any health items left, you could be doomed unless you somehow pop off a few headshots before they get you. I died in almost every cultist encounter several times until I got lucky enough to get them first. In addition to this, the bosses can be somewhat challenging too. I don't want to spoil too much, but just know that most of them are bullet sponges that almost require you to use the shotgun. There's even one that has a ranged attack. And here's what becomes what I would consider to be the biggest problem with the game. Trying to escape any enemies that are chasing you can be nearly impossible to do, especially when you use the shotgun. See, whenever you have to pump the weapon or reload, you slow down tremendously. Same happens when reloading the pistol. By slowing down, you're giving the enemy a chance to catch up or set up an attack. It almost makes it not worth using the shotgun, but it typically does so much damage that it's hard to not use it against bosses. Reloading, fine, I can bear with that. But you really have to slow down this much when simply pumping in a new shell? Come on now. But considering that this is my only real complaint, isn't too shabby at all for Nightmare of Decay, especially if you hoard health items. Plus, the final boss is actually disappointingly easy, so I have faith that you'll be fine. Unfortunately, the game is incredibly short, with my playthrough clocking in at just under 2 hours. Thankfully, you do unlock 2 new modes, a horde survival and a dungeon escape mode, where you have to go through a few procedurally generated floors and defeat creatures to find the exit. You can find and earn credits in order to buy upgraded gear between each floor. I was having a bit of enjoyment with this until the graphics just went completely insane and glitched out, preventing me from continuing. Yeah, well, for what it gives you, Nightmare of Decay is worth the $5. Yep, it's only $5. The graphics and sound replicate that PS1 feel perfectly, and although there's not a lot of spooky moments, I did have one moment that kinda gave me shivers, which is unusual for horror games. The extra modes and replayability are there. The gameplay is solid with no bugs other than the graphics glitch that I mentioned. And there's an amazing monstrous beast that was hilarious to see and fight, although I refuse to spoil it for you. The ending does set up for a sequel, which I really hope the developer is going to be working on. Nightmare of Decay deserves its overwhelmingly positive rating on Steam, and if you're a fan of the genre, the $5 you throw its way is definitely worth it. Although I wouldn't consider the game to be perfect, I still wasn't able to put the game down. Final score? 6 out of 7. This is Reaper. Happy fragging.